All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into a case in like this perfect neighborhood, but with a really dark twist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's the murder of Shanti Cooper Trronis, and they think her husband did it.
Wow.
So we've got some excerpts from a true crime podcast about it, all about this case in Orlando, Florida. This one is crazy.
Love those.
And what's interesting is we know almost right away who the suspect is, but it's like, how do they actually prove it?
Oh, so it's more about the how than the who.
Exactly. And all the sources say it's all about circumstantial evidence. So let's start at the very beginning with that 911 call.
Oh, yeah. Those are always so interesting.
It's actually on the podcast.
Oh, wow.
And it is definitely interesting. It's full of like red flags right from the start.
Really?
Yeah. So what makes it so suspicious?
Well, okay. So it's her husband, David, calling right.
Right.
And he's like super frantic saying he just found Shanti in the bathtub and she's not responding.
Oh, gosh. So it sounds like just a tragic accident at first.
Yeah. But the first responders got there and started noticing things that just didn't add up.
Oh, no. Like what?
Well, first of all, rigor mortis was already setting in.
Oh, wow. So she had been dead for a while.
Yeah. A while, which like totally contradicts David saying he just found her.
Right.
And then there was the water.
The water.
Yeah, like he said she was like partially submerged,
Okay.
but her clothes were more like damp than soaking wet and there wasn't any water on the floor.
Wait, so she's in the tub, but no water.
Yeah, it's weird,
Oh,
right?
it's super weird.
So like those little details start making everyone wonder.
Right.
And then they saw injuries on her face, like bruising around her eyes and jaw.
Oh, so not like from slipping in the tub.
Right, exactly.
Gosh, so right away we're thinking something bad happened.
Yeah. And then the autopsy basically confirmed it.
What did it say?
So they found a fractured hyoid bone.
The what bone?
It's this small bone in your neck,
Oh, okay.
and it's often broken in strangulation cases.
Oh, wow.
Plus, there wasn't any water in her lungs.
So she didn't drown.
Nope, it wasn't an accident at all.
So strangulation, and David's already acting weird.
Right, he's definitely the main suspect now.
And remember, Shanti's a successful financial consultant.
Right, she wouldn't just disappear.
So, of course, they focus on David. They bring him in for questioning.
Wow.
And get this, it turns into this 10-hour interview.
10 hours.
10 hours. They must have been trying to get him to slip up.
Yeah, for sure. And it didn't take long for his story to start falling apart.
Like, what happened?
Okay, so he said Shanti came downstairs a couple times that morning,
Okay.
but her fitness tracker didn't show any movement after like 11:45 the night before,
So the tracker was like a witness?
basically.
Wow.
And then there's the whole alibi about the dogs.
What about the dogs?
Well, he said he took them to the park for 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yeah, that seems a little long, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And he said he didn't talk to Shanti at all during that time. No calls, no texts.
Well, that's weird. She's a busy lady.
Exactly, and she had her phone on her.
Right.
Oh, and another thing about that park alibi.
Yeah.
A neighbor saw David out alone without the dogs around that same time.
So he lied.
It seems like it.
So much for that alibi.
Right, and then they found something that really sealed the deal. They found Shanti's engagement ring in David's luggage at his mother's house.
So he goes to his mom's after finding his wife dead, and he has the ring.
Yep.
That does not look good.
Not at all. And you see how it's not just one thing?
Right.
It's all these little details adding up.
Yeah, they're all pointing to him.
Exactly.
So we've got this suspicious death, a husband acting strangely, a totally messed up alibi, but like, why? What would make him do this?
Well, that's where this house renovation comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big part of the story.
Yeah.
So they're both on their second marriages, right? Trying to start fresh.
Okay.
David moved to Florida to be with Shanti, and they buy this big fixer-upper house in Delaney Park.
New marriage, new house, new life sounds nice.
Right, but it all goes very wrong.
Oh.
Well, David had these big dreams for the house, but it turned into this huge money pit.
Oh, so just a classic renovation nightmare.
It was more than that. The renovations took over a year. There were always delays and new contractors. The house was basically unlivable.
Oh, gosh. So they're living in this construction zone.
Pretty much. Shanti was stuck in one room with her son while the rest of the house was gutted.
That sounds awful.
And to make it worse, Shanti was the one paying for everything.
Oh, because she had the steady job.
Exactly. David wasn't working.
Oh, so you can see how this house became like this huge pressure cooker.
Yeah, and the sources kind of hint that David was obsessed with this renovation.
Really?
Yeah, he even tried to get their half-finished house on that reality TV show, Zombie House Flippin'.
Wait, so he wanted their chaotic house on TV?
Apparently, he thought it would solve everything.
Really?
Yeah, like a free renovation, maybe even some fame.
But what about Shanti? Did she want to be on TV?
It sounds like she was at her wit's end. She was done with the whole renovation.
Yeah, who could blame her?
And then a week later, she's murdered.
So we have a failing renovation, money problems, a husband who's like obsessed with this house, and a wife who's had enough.
Right, it's like a recipe for disaster.
It really is, and it makes you wonder, was this like a sudden burst of anger, or was it something more planned?
That's a good question. And the podcast also mentions some possible issues in David's previous marriage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so maybe there's more to uncover there.
Definitely something to think about.
Yeah, we'll have to dive into all that.
We've got all the evidence against David, but like, what could make someone snap like that?
That's what we'll try to figure out. Okay, so we're back, and we were just talking about what could driven David to do this.
Right, like, was this a guy who just snapped, or is there like a darker side to all this?
Right. So let's think about that like the psychology here.
Yeah.
You know, the podcast mentioned those possible issues in David's first marriage.
Oh, yeah, with his ex-wife?
Yeah, like she had those unexplained illnesses.
Right, right.
It makes you think, like, was there some kind of pattern?
Yeah, like maybe it was abuse or something?
It's possible, but we don't have all the details.
Yeah, so we have to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Right. But it's definitely something to keep in mind as we go through everything.
For sure. But okay, so let's say David did it. How do you actually prove that?
Well, that's where circumstantial evidence is so important.
Yeah, because there were no eyewitnesses, no confession.
Right. It's like putting together a puzzle.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Each piece on its own might not be enough. But when you see them all together, they can tell a whole story.
So, like, what were some of the biggest pieces of the puzzle here?
Well, we talked about all the problems with his alibi, right? The fitness tracker, the neighbor, and that engagement ring.
Right, like none of that made sense.
Exactly. And then there's the physical evidence, too.
Oh, right, like an autopsy.
Yeah, that showed it was strangulation. And there was other stuff, too, like they found some of Shanti's DNA under his fingernails.
Oh, wow. So they're building this case with the evidence to the timeline, and David's acting super suspicious, but it still seems hard to prove.
It was. And the prosecution did a really good job. They had to present all this to the jury in a way that was easy to understand and believe.
That's like telling a story, right?
Totally. They have to take all these facts and make them into something the jury can follow.
Right.
And in this case, they had another really important witness, Shanti's son, Jackson.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I can't even imagine what he went through.
It's really sad he was in court the whole time.
Wow.
And, you know, we've been talking about all the facts and evidence.
Right.
But this is about real people.
Yeah.
And hearing Jackson talk about losing his mom, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really reminds you that this isn't just some case, it's someone's life.
Exactly. The podcast actually has a clip of Jackson's statement.
Oh, wow. Yeah, let's listen to that.
Okay, here it is.
You know, after everything we've learned, there's one part that I still can't get over that whole reality TV show thing.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? Like you have this horrible crime and he's trying to get them on TV.
It just seems so wrong, like trying to make money off of this tragedy.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder, what was he thinking?
I think it goes deeper than that. Remember we talked about how insecure he might have been out of work?
Yeah.
All that stress on the relationship? Maybe this TV show was his way to escape all that. Like he could pretend everything was fine.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like a fantasy life where he's the successful homeowner, not the guy who can't even finish his own house.
Exactly. It's like he wanted a shortcut to success instead of facing his problems head on.
It's so sad, really. And in a way, that same denial might have played a role in Shanti's death, too.
That's a scary thought. But let's talk about the legal side of things for a minute. This whole case was built on circumstantial evidence. How do you convince a jury with that?
Yeah, it seems pretty tough. No confession, no eyewitnesses, just all these little details.
It's definitely a challenge, but the prosecution did a great job in this case. They laid out a timeline, connected all the evidence, and showed how much there was against David.
Right, like you said before, each piece by itself might not mean much, but together it paints a clear picture.
Exactly. Like think about fingerprints. If you find one at a crime scene, it might not mean anything. But if you find a ton of them all from the same person, that's hard to ignore.
It's about the weight of all that evidence.
Right. And here, it was just so much pointing to David. The alibi, the DNA, the ring was overwhelming.
And the jury agreed. David got life in prison. But even though it's over, this case leaves you with a lot to think about.
It does. It reminds us that this can happen anywhere, even in places where everything looks perfect. We have to watch for those warning signs in relationships, not just for ourselves, but for the people we care about.
And it shows how something as normal as a house renovation can turn dangerous. When you add money problems, stress, and someone who might be violent, it's like a ticking time bomb.
It's a really complicated story. But it's important to talk about these things. If anything we talked about today makes you worried, or if you need help, please reach out. You're not alone.
Well said. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive helped shed some light on this case. Even though it's a tough one, remember, stay curious, stay informed, and always trust your gut. Until next time.